Good morning. We are learning Rambam Hilchos Psula Mikdashim, Perik Yudches, Halacha Aleph. The Rambam writes, Kol HaMachashev Machshava She'einu Nechoina B'Kotsh. Whoever thinks an inappropriate thought in Kotsh. Now, what are inappropriate thoughts are? Shlei Lishma, all the different halachas. Generally, it's a reference to Shlei Lishma, we'll see soon. And a reference to, so the halacha is, Hareza Eiver B'Lei Saseh. He's Eiver and Alei Saseh. Eiver and Alei Saseh. However, says the Rambam, Shayem Leichosh, Lav, Leichosh, don't think, Halacha Beis, Piashu, Lomdish, called Din Zeh, of Leichosh, Shliafsad HaKotshim Machshava. You should not destroy Kotshim B'Machshava. Shouldn't destroy Kotshim Machshava. It is similar to one who is puts a mum in a curb. Okay, there's a lot of discussion about this. We're going to try to keep it short. Perik Tesvav Halacha Gimel, the Rambam writes, Oser Lachshev L'chashem B'Kotshim Machshava She'ena. You're not allowed to think machshava that's not nechayna, right? K'may shizba fichach zevach sheshachta shlei l'shma mincha shecomes shlei l'shma. You have to finish up. He says the rest, Rabbi, this is fine because you're not allowed to think of machshava she'en nechayna. And he goes through, even if he did some of that Veda Shalei Lishma, you still got to continue the other ones Lishma. And then he goes on and explains, but by Chatas it's different. That's not our discussion. I'm just bringing out that this was discussed before. Okay, so there's a lot of discussion on the Rambam when he says that you don't get Malkos because She'ena Machshava nice. Let's go through a couple of them and see the Rambam's approach to this. There are various explanations in the Rambam, but we're going to try to come to some kind of an understanding of the Rambam. And in the Rambam, there's a lot of those who are medagdik in this lashon of Eina Machshava Ma'is. In Hilchos Chirus, which is talking about sima, you're not allowed to cause an animal not to eat from while they're working the field. Well, if you did it by yelling at the animal or doing it with your mouth, you get Malkos. Even if you didn't put a muzzle on it. You muzzled him by scaring him, by avoiding him. It's also awesome. And this is a Gemara. Rabbi Perlstein says, why? Because akimas piv, the fact that you're using your mouth, is also nice. Who says your mouth is with your hands? Your mouth is also nice. Your lips are nice. And Rabbi Perlstein says, kol olei av mice. A sound is not a mice. I'm not getting into what this argument is, Keil versus Peh. It's an interesting concept. But look, Rabbi Yechina holds Akimas also have a mice. Okay. It's no different than using your body, any part of your body that moves, that creates. Hilchos Tmura. The Rambam writes. Now, Tmura is when I say, person says, I am going to exchange this carbon for another carbon. And the halacha is you get Malkos for that. Look, the Rambam in Hilchos Tmura and then also in Hilchos Sanhedrin call Hameimer like I'll call Behema Shiyama. If you do that, you get Malkos. As it says, Lo Yachlifenem Le'amres. He didn't do a Maisi. Yeshmuel Lamdu. You learn out that you get Malkos on these things, even though you didn't do a Maisi. So to in Hilchos Sanhedrin, he writes the same thing. Kolav Shem Maisa and Leikin Olav, except for Meimar, for Tmura, Shua, and Kalos Chaver B'Shem. Okay, well, the main thing is Tmura, using your mouth. Now again, this is a Gemara in Tmura Dav Gimel. Gemara says it's a brisa. In the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan says, don't say Meimar out of list Meimar together with these, because B'diburai, with his mouth, also mice. Oh, Pek tastes above Mitzir. Above Mitzir, Rabbi Yochanan says, Akimus was have mice. And here, Rabbi Yochanan brings this brayse Kolav Shem B'Mais and Leikin Olav, and he mentions all three. V'lachei Akimus was have mice. You're using your lips on mice. The taste is no. Rabbi Yochanan Akimus was have mice means exactly what he says in Torah. Through your lips, you are creating a mice. Okay, what that means, we'll have to explain. That Akimus Swasav is a mice because it's creating something. It's creating a hekdesh. It's creating kedusha on another animal. But the only problem is that the Rambam puts Meimar in with the others. It's the same league. So they all struggle with that. There's a big struggle with it. My Mishnah says Lav Doctor. I'm just mentioning because that's it's an expression, Meimar, but he doesn't mean Meimar. All right, so I want to. There's a lot of different approaches to this, and I'm going to give you a quick review of them without getting into the details of it. The problem is, why is machshava einen nechene? I thought that this carbon should become possible because of what I thought, right? I'm causing a psul. So why don't we say here b'dibura of advice, just like Rabbi Yochanan says? What's that different than Tmura? Why does the Rambam seem to say Tmura is not either a mice? Dibura is a nice. So the Maggid Mishnah's approach is that when you use your lips, you're doing a mice. And the reason is, like Taisa, because you're causing a mice. But if a dibur, if using your lips that doesn't create a mice, you don't get you don't get Malkos. That would be considered not a mice. Now, why is Tmura not a mice? Tmura is, yeah. According to the Maggid Mishnah's first text. Second, there it says that if you can't do it with a mice, it doesn't help. You have to be able to do it with a mice. You have to be able to actually have an act. Then we say b'diburas have a mice. Mishnah says that by Chasima and Edom Zaymim, the mice is the dibur. It's what you're creating. I'm sorry, what you're creating. You're holding back the animal. Edom, that is the killing. He says, but Tzmura, what are you doing? You're making chul and kachim. So what? There's nothing wrong with that. It's the way you're doing it. That's your dibur. It's not the action. Nice approach. Rabbi Yosef Dave Soloveitchik wants to say a chidush pelek. Two things he says. One is that it's not pshat. When you think of machshava shein nechena, you're passing the carbon. But since you're in the middle of Aveda and you're thinking of machshava shein, the carbon becomes possible. It's a mamela that you think. In addition to that, he explains. Hold on a second. In addition to that, he says that that the burakav ma'isa is when the ma'isa is part of the issa by stopping it from eating. The Isser is to stop it. Whereas by machshava, the Isser is machshava. Don't think bad thoughts. Not what you'd accomplish. It's beautiful thoughts, but I don't think that's what the Rambam says. Okay. Let's examine the words of the Rambam. And I think the Rambam, as always, if you read his words, you can come to a conclusion of what he's saying. And I think, see, he's pretty clear. He writes, and therefore you got to finish up. And Kamashi is by. No, I'm sorry, Kamashi is by, right? Which means, in Perik Tesvav, as he's going to explain in Perik Gitches, if the Isser is, I'm not allowed to destroy Kachim, because it's like Matal Mum, if just because it's not going to be a good carbon for the Bailam, why is that considered Olul Shem Bailam? Now again, some of these questions are not mine, these are questions that I've discussed. I'm just bringing them all together. Why is that considered destroying a carbon? The carbon's a good carbon. The Bailam needs to be another carbon. That's his business. Why in the world does he compare it to Matal Mum B'Kachim? Who needs that comparison? What is he gaining from it? On the contrary, it seems that is what creates this problem. You read the Rambam, he seems to say, it's like Matal Mum B'Kachim, and yet you don't get Malkos. In other words, the question is, if it's Matal Mum B'Kachim, you should get Malkos. Don't bring it, and you want to have a question. And if it is a question, what's his answer? She'ena machshava ma'is. It's Matal Mum B'Kachim, Matal Mum B'Kachim. Who cares if you did it through mental telepathy or some other form that you accomplished? Mind over matter. You're going to tell me that some of those magicians or whatever they are that managed to bend, or somebody who was able to bend an item with his mind, who cares? What does that mean? Now, the Rambam writes, a Meimer is not a Maisa. Now, except for the Mishnah, nobody accepts that approach, that the Rambam is Lav Dafke, and it's hard to say. I mean, the Mishnah is saying it because he has no choice. But it seems to be that that Tamur is not a Maisa. If Tamur is not a Maisa, who cares that it's Machshava? That doesn't matter. Machshava Shenechain is not a Maisa. Finished. Okay, so let's say that the Meimer is in a league of its own, as the Lechem Mishnah says. That you're making chulun kutch, there's nothing wrong with it. It's only a machshava. It's only dibur. Dibur is not a mice. But if you read the Rambam here, the Rambam says very clearly, also lahav shalayav shana kutch machshava. That can't. The Isser is being kutch machshava. The Isser say that kutch, not like those who say that it's not. That's what it is, and that's a mice. And that's why he stresses to stress that this is the whole Isser. The Isser is the making the moment, passing it. So the has a murder kasha. If your Isser is passing it and you're doing it with your machshava, you are doing a ma'aser. And what is his answer? She'ein hamachshava ma'aser. You can't have a chalos ma'aser, a shem ma'aser on a machshava. Chaka, you're doing a machshava, you're doing a ma'aser with your machshava, but it has to relate back to the ma'aser, to the machshava, and turn that machshava into a ma'aser. You can't. And that's what Taisa says, that when you're using Akima Svasav, there can be Chal Hashem ma'aser on it because you're accomplishing something, but it can't happen with machshava. Machshava cannot get Hashem ma'aser. That's what the Rambam means. I think those are the words of the Rambam. I'm reading it. What's wrong with a carbon that's not that's not oil shambayla? So I saw the Divrei Yatziv Kleisenberger in his Chuvas says brings the Hakir, and it's a Hakir that's discussed somewhat in others. What's shat shlei oil shambayla? Is it because there's something wrong with the carbon, or just it just didn't go for this bailam? So and the Chassam Sofer says the second way, but it seems from the Rambam the first way that it's something wrong with the carbon, and that's what he means. But you can't go back and do it again. You can't go make it worse. Okay, now I want to go take it one little step. Perhaps we can compare this idea of the Rambam that a machshava can't become a ma'isa to something that Tanya writes in Perek Zion, and he explains when the Chazal say machshava teva kodesh baruch hu mitzaref l'ma'isa. He asks a question. It should have said malol avakos kilos. That's the simple chat. You do something, you didn't end up doing it. You wanted to do something. It's like you did it. So the Alter Rebbe goes with I'm not going to get into the whole Perek, but the idea of the Perek is, the point is that you need to do actions in order to make the actions holy and bring holiness to the actions, to a certain level of holiness. You have to have feelings. You have to have emotions that come from the heart, because the heart is physical and it relates to the action. That's what he says. It's also physical. It's also coarse. It's also chumri, like another aver, another limb in the body, and therefore it can give energy to the action, to what you're doing. But intellect does not relate to action. It doesn't become part of the action. It stays separate, and that's why you need an act of God, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, mitzaref l'ma'isa. A person that can't get himself emotionally charged can get himself intellectually charged. And that the Eibishter can do. That's a special gift. So you see here a concept that machshava in the lashon of the Alter Rebbe is gavu darcheyem l'mayla b'chinas hamais. It doesn't connect to mais. It's not exactly what we're saying, but the idea that eina machshava mais. Machshava can't become mais. Machshava has no kumri to it. It's not machshava. It's not mais. Anyway, I think that could be understood. And Al Kaponim, everybody have a great day. Zaygus und Nishtak.